Hi, everybody. So, in this lecture, we are going to go over the rhetorical situation. So, let me get into slideshow mode here. So, you should be watching this lecture while we are starting on our rhetorical analysis unit. That is generally the first unit that we have in class. So you should have read and watched lectures about rhetoric and analyzing rhetoric and a rhetorical analysis kind of overview. In those lectures, you will have heard me talk about the rhetorical situation. So our goals and kind of purpose for this lecture include getting more familiar with that rhetorical situation concept. So we need to learn how to identify and discuss the rhetorical situations that are surrounding specific texts. So we'll be looking at different things in class, and I'll ask you to tell me about and to research the rhetorical situation surrounding that piece. Remember that you are going to need to write about these things. Not only for class assignments, but also for your upcoming essay in the rhetorical analysis essay. So that's kind of the why behind why we need to know what the rhetorical situation is. So I want you to start by just thinking back to our introduction to rhetoric. Remember that rhetoric is just language, and rhetorical analysis looks at how we use language in order to persuade. So I want you to think about it. Take a few minutes and write to yourself about what you currently know about rhetoric, what you currently know about rhetorical analysis, and then what questions do you have so far? And remember that you can ask me those questions. You can ask your group those questions. You can text me, email me, all those good things. So pause the lecture, take a few minutes, and free write to yourself. If you don't already have paper and something to write with or a new doc handy, now's also a good time to get that out so that you have those for the rest of the lecture. You can as well. All right. If you're able to, it is also a great idea to share with your group. So check in with each other about rhetoric, rhetorical features, the rhetorical situation, and just sort of collaborate with your group about how you're doing with this. The rhetorical analysis unit can be a very difficult one for students. So I want you to make sure that you're leaning on your groups to talk about these things. So if you haven't already, it's also a good idea to chat with your group and bounce ideas off of each other. Talk in groups if you're able to. If not, you can go ahead and move on in the lecture. All right, so some terms that we need to be familiar with if we're going to understand rhetoric and understand the rhetorical situation. The first one is that rhetoric is just language. So, rhetoric refers to the language that authors, artists, and creators use as they make things like songs, speeches, poems, and more. Remember that rhetorical features are sort of how we deal with the ways in which rhetoric is used in a piece. We give those things names so that we have a shared language that we can use to discuss their effectiveness. So, rhetorical features are things like pathos, ethos, logos, repetition, tone, all that good stuff that we've been talking about in class. Remember that rhetoric is purposeful. So, when we create things, we are always doing that in response to something. And this is where rhetorical situations come into play. We need to understand the author's purpose and what they're responding to so that we can better understand their messages. So that brings us to rhetorical situations. When we're looking at the rhetorical situation, we're considering all of the different things that influence the author or the artist and cause them to create the piece that we are looking at. So we want to look at things like who. Research the author's background. What kinds of things happened in their life that might have influenced them and guided their interests? We also want to ask questions of when. When was this piece written or created? What kinds of things were happening at that time? And would these things have affected the author and gotten a response from them? It's also important to consider where this piece was written or created, what kinds of issues were relevant in that physical or geographical area at that time, and hopefully those things will shed some light on the why. Why would the author have created this piece? So sometimes they tell us their purpose explicitly, but sometimes we have to make educated guesses about that. But all of these things together help us to better understand the rhetorical situation. That is the real world things that were going on at the time the song, speech, or poem that you're looking at was created. So take a few minutes again, write to yourself about one of your favorite songs. What do you think the song responds to? How do you know? Some tips to consider: the song might be about something that's important to the artist or something they've been through in their lives. This is a good way to start considering the rhetorical situation. And it's a great time to also share with your group. So, what songs did everybody write about? What kinds of things does your favorite song respond to? And then think about it. If you had to get an outside source about some part of the rhetorical situation for your favorite song, which topics would you look for? So, this is an important step for our class specifically because everybody gets to choose a song, speech, or poem to write about for our upcoming essay. But you are required to have an outside source that helps me better understand some aspect of the rhetorical situation for your favorite song. So this is great practice. Chat with your groups if you're able to. All right, so now that we know that the rhetorical situation refers to all of the things in the real world that influence an author or an artist to create a particular piece, it's a good idea to look at some examples. So, the example that I have for you today is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. So, I've pulled just a short quote from that speech where he says, "I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today." So, if we think about that very famous speech, we can start to consider some of the things that influenced the speaker to create that speech, right? So, we want to ask those questions of who and when and where and why. So, I have my speech here in this middle bubble. And then I've filled out some things and I'm just brainstorming here to think about, who wrote this? When was it happening? Why might he be giving this speech? Where was it happening? So, if we think about the who, we know that he was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was African American, he was a man, he was influential in his community, and he had firsthand experience with things like racism and segregation. We know that this was happening in the 1960s. We know that it was given during a civil rights march. And we know that this was happening in America. He was from the South, and much of his audience would have also been from the Southern United States. So, all of those things help me to understand why he wrote this speech. So, he wanted to argue for the need for equality and an end to segregation. He wanted to address racism in the United States. He wanted to inspire his audience to participate in the civil rights movement. So, all of these things are aspects of the rhetorical situation for this particular speech. So, you'll notice that everybody's rhetorical situation is going to be very different because we're all focusing on and writing about different songs, speeches, or poems. So, when you're looking at the rhetorical situation surrounding a piece, remember that you're focusing on what influenced the author, what was happening in the real world when this particular thing was created that led to the creation of this particular speech, for instance. So, how can I find out what influenced an author or an artist? In order to research the rhetorical situation, you're going to need to do some research. So, in your upcoming essay, you'll need to use an outside source to help explain the rhetorical situation. So it's important to touch bases on finding those outside resources. So as you research a piece, you're going to look for an outside source that helps you identify some of the things that might have influenced that author. So this is a great time to take a minute and just sort of pause, add to your free write. What do you currently know about outside sources? How can you find these? Why do we use them? Take a few minutes and add to your notes for this lecture, and just sort of think to yourself about what you currently know. And then, of course, share with your group if you're able to. So if you guys are maybe watching this lecture together or something like that, think about and sort of swap information. What do we know about outside sources, and where do we need to get some more information or some additional support? Also, think about how you can get support for finding outside sources. Remember, we have tutoring that is required for class and available to you for free on campus or online. Check out our welcome module for information about that. Tutoring is a great time to chat with a tutor and work on getting some outside sources or understanding how to find them. All right. So, what kinds of sources can I use and where can I find them? So, in your upcoming essay, you'll be required to include outside sources for your rhetorical situation paragraph. Remember that there are several different types of sources, and the two big categories are popular sources or scholarly sources. A popular source is just a website, for example, that ends in edu.org or .gov. You could also use a national newspaper such as the New York or LA Times. If you find an interview with the artist or the author, that's a great popular source to use to help you understand the rhetorical situation. And all of these can be found online with a Google search or similar. On the other side over here, we have scholarly sources. This is a different kind of source that is a little bit more credible. It's peer reviewed, so it would be written by an expert in the field and then also reviewed by other experts in the field before it's published. The university pays for access to these on your behalf, or if you're in one of my city college classes, the same thing applies. Your city college pays for access to these on your behalf. And you can find these by using your library website. So if you're at Fresno State with me, you can use the Fresno State Library. If you're at Fresno City or College of the Sequoias, for example, you'll also find links to your particular library. You can look in our syllabus for links to the library. You can reach out to me if you can't find those. And you can also find links to the library information in our welcome modules. There are some kinds of sources that you should avoid for this assignment and just for assignments in general in our class. So when I ask you for an outside source, remember that you should not use encyclopedias. Things like Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica, they're great places to start getting a basic understanding of a topic, but they're not appropriate for use in assignments that you turn in for our class. So just keep that in mind. Blogs and random websites. So most things that end in .com are not going to work for our classes. However, if you feel like it's a good source and you want to use it, just run it by me and I'm happy to take a look and see if it's acceptable for whichever assignment you're looking at. Also be careful of blogs and opinion pieces and anything without an author. Also, if you are looking for a scholarly source and you want to start with something like Google Scholar, it's a great, easy tool, but you will usually hit a paywall before you get to any articles. So please make sure that you're using the library website instead of just a general search so that you don't have to pay for those scholarly articles. All right, so let's look at an example of some sources that you might use. So for instance, I have an example of a Wikipedia article for this I Have a Dream speech, right? So Wikipedia has its uses. This is a great place to start if you don't have a basic understanding of what the speech is about. So if you want to start your research with just a quick Google search of whatever you're looking for, you might find a Wikipedia article, and that's fine. It's not reputable enough to use as your source for your essay, but it's a good place to start. So once you find that Wikipedia article, you can check out the references at the bottom, and usually you'll be able to find more reputable options there. So this is just a screenshot of some references from this Wikipedia article, and I can see that there are a couple of good options here. Another way that you can look at research on the rhetorical situation is to find a reputable website. So, from those references on the previous slide, I looked up this particular article. So, it's a Stanford article about this same speech, and it's more credible because it's endorsed by a reputable academic source, in this case, a nationally accredited university. So this one would be a good option to use to discuss my rhetorical situation, and I still got it from Wikipedia. It's just that Wikipedia was a step along my research journey and not my destination. If you need help finding outside sources, I've got a whole bunch of different links for you here, and links to this PowerPoint will be available in the comments of this lecture, so you can access it that way. Or you can also access the actual PowerPoint itself by going to our schedule of classes or our weekly schedule on Canvas. And then once you do that, all of these links will be active for you. Okay, so once I have my outside source ready to go and I'm ready to start discussing my rhetorical situation, then I need to actually use that outside source to do that. So, a couple of things. First, what should your outside source be about? Your source for this particular rhetorical situation paragraph that you'll be writing should be about something in the author's background that helps us understand why they created this piece. It could also be about something in the real world that the author responds to in the piece. Or it could be about something in the real world that you feel influenced the author or artist and contributed to the creation of this song, speech, or poem. So if you have an outside source about some or all of these things, then that's great. Your source should not focus on summarizing the song, speech, or poem. So if it's interpreting the meaning of, or if it's just telling us generally what it's about, that's not a good source. It should also not be about general information about the artist or author that doesn't help us understand why they wrote or created the piece that you're looking at. So if it's just kind of a general article about their life or something like that, that's not a great choice. So make sure that your source is focused and has relevant information. If you're ever on the fence about a source, remember you can run it by the people in your group. You can also spend some time with a tutor and ask if it looks appropriate for this assignment. And then, of course, you can always text or email myself, and I'm happy to take a look at it for you as well. Remember that you're going to be using your outside source to support your discussion of the rhetorical situation surrounding the song, speech, or poem you're analyzing. Also, remember that this should happen in only one paragraph, and this paragraph is going to be after your introduction for the essay. Okay, so if you're not to a point where you're writing your essay yet, that's okay. You can come back and revisit this lecture when you are. And then remember to discuss the rhetorical situation on your own, but use your outside source to support just one part of that discussion. So tell us about the things that you feel influenced your author or artist to write that song, speech, or poem. And then it's okay if your rhetorical situation paragraph has an outside source that only touches on just a small part of the rhetorical situation, because there are going to be lots of different things that influence an author or artist, right? And your outside source for this paragraph doesn't have to cover all of that. So let's look at an example. Remember that in our essay packet, you can see a sample student essay. So again, if you have a link to this PowerPoint, this link will be live for you. You can click on that to get to our rhetorical analysis packet. So I want you to check out the rhetorical situation paragraph in that sample essay. And you can see my comments on there. So this is a good example of a rhetorical situation paragraph, because it is summing up the rhetorical situation surrounding the piece, and it's also using an outside source. So you can see how that is happening. All right, so take a few minutes and write to yourself about the rhetorical situation paragraph you're writing for our upcoming essay. What should be included? What should it focus on? And what's its purpose for your readers? So go ahead and add some things to your notes about this lecture. Remember, if you're having a hard time, reach out to your group, reach out to a tutor, reach out to myself. We can help with these things. And then, of course, also share with your group. So your group is there to help you, just be a sounding board, help you with where to go for resources. So how are the various members of your group doing with this whole concept of a rhetorical situation and writing a rhetorical situation paragraph in the upcoming essay? So make sure that you're swapping ideas and helping each other out with that. All right, and if you haven't yet, please make sure that your group uses one of your group meetings to check out this rhetorical situation essay packet, and specifically looking at how things are going with that rhetorical situation paragraph in that sample essay. So anytime that you are meeting with your group, which should be happening pretty regularly, remember you can do this as a group chat, you can meet online, you can meet in person. But chat with each other about that sample student essay, and particularly look at that rhetorical situation paragraph. Look at how it's going, why it's going well, and things that you can take from that to emulate in your own papers. And that brings us to a recap. So remember that first you should identify the rhetorical situation surrounding the piece you are analyzing. Then you should find an outside source about some aspect of the rhetorical situation for your piece. And lastly, using your outside source, write one paragraph about the rhetorical situation surrounding your piece. If you are not to a point where you're writing the essay yet, that's okay. Remember that we're still looking at the rhetorical situation in our examples as we're learning about what rhetoric is and how to analyze it, right? So it's still important to understand what the rhetorical situation is and to be able to talk about that rhetorical situation for each piece that we're looking at in class. But I also wanted you guys to see the end goal, which is writing a rhetorical situation paragraph on your own for your upcoming essay. Remember that these are new concepts, right? So if you are feeling overwhelmed or you're not sure, that's completely normal. This is all new for everybody in the class. So make sure that you're using those additional support links that I have for you guys. So remember to access this PowerPoint in the comments or in our weekly schedules. And then you'll have access to these links. So if I need help with rhetoric, I can check out the rhetorical analysis playlist for more lectures about rhetoric and rhetorical analysis. If I need to get started writing the essay, look at this presentation so that you can get some practice with writing quote sandwich paragraphs about rhetoric. If you need to see a tutor, remember to check out these links. Fresno State students, your stuff is here. Fresno City, your stuff is here. If you need help finding your required outside source for the upcoming essay, remember that you should use different things that we have available in the library. So Fresno State students, you've got a first year writing research guide that is going to be helpful for you. Fresno City students, you have an English 1A research guide that's going to be helpful for you. So lots of helpful stuff that you can use. Remember, you can also always get in touch with me, reach out to your groups, and you can always text or email me, come by my office hours if you need additional help.